here. I'd like to thank the board for putting in your time to assist with our applicant and the appeal that's going before you now. I'd like to bring up two things before we start. The first thing is Catherine Levesser, who was a board member, had to resign, or she is leaving because she's unable to attend the meetings any longer. She has taken a new position and moving in a different direction. But we do appreciate her being part of the group. So just so everybody knows, she is no longer on the board per a request from her. The second thing is, and when we do our roll call, is one of the requirements now is that when you answer that you're attending, if you can also indicate your location, what city you're in, that helps meet the rule requirements as recently brought forth, I guess. So, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Paul, and thank you again.
Thank you, Glenn. So I call to order the May 2021 meeting of the Building Board of Appeals. Can we have a roll call, please?
Paul Darling.
Here.
Robert Hart.
Here.
David Arnsdorf.
Here. Deborah, hey, please indicate your location.
Sorry about that.
Can we start over?
Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, Paul Darling.
Here, and I'm in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Robert Hart.
Here, I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, third planet from the sun.
David Arnsdorf.
I'm here in my house in Ann Arbor.
Hugh Flack.
I'm here and also in my house in Ann Arbor.
Jeffrey Perkins. I thought we had Jeffrey.
You're muted, Jeff.
Sorry, I was muted. Here, Ann Arbor.
Bruce Carson. My show is absent, not in the waiting room. We have a quorum. If I could call a roll call for staff. I have Glenn Dempsey. Michael Redmond.
Here, and I'm in the Lansing area.
Michael Redmond.
Here, City of Ann Arbor.
Brandy Lewis.
Here, Adrian, Michigan.
Mike Lemieux.
Here, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
John Reiser.
Here, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Myself, Deborah Williams in Ann Arbor. We're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. We have an agenda posted. We're looking to have someone make a motion to approve the agenda. Is there any additions or changes to the agenda that anyone would like to make before we approve the agenda? Need a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Those in favor? Aye.
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 The agenda is passed. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the January 21st, 2021 meeting. Was there any comments on those?
I think I have one change to make. Mike Lemieux, you were part of that meeting, correct? So I don't have you on the roll call.
I need to know the date.
It was January 21st.
Yes, I was there.
All right, I will make that change.
We have a motion to approve the amended minutes for the January 21st meeting.
Motion
Move to approve the amended January 21st minutes.
Support.
Second.
Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Minutes as amended are approved. The next item on the agenda is appeals and actions and show cause hearings. And I'd like to kind of walk through the procedure of this for the new applicants, for the applicants here to understand the process here. The first thing we'll do is once we call your appeal up, we'll have a staff report and they'll do their report from the billing official, fire department, and if there's any other inspectors who are going to weigh in. Next, we'll ask the applicant to present their appeal, and brief comment on what they're requesting. And we'd appreciate if you would list if you're asking for appeal based on if it's equally or better than the code doesn't apply, or if the code is being misinterpreted. So after the applicant presents their appeal, the board will have discussions among themselves. We may have questions for the applicant. And at which point we're ready to make a motion. We'll close the discussion and we'll make a motion and vote on the appeal. So with that said, the first item on the agenda is application 210968, BBA 21002 at 660 Earhart Road, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Can we have a staff report, please?
Yes. Good afternoon to all board members, to all staff, and to all the appeals applicants. I prepared a brief synopsis of the staff report for BBA 21-002. Please reference my staff report or the BBA packet for the applicable fire code verbiage. It was included. The property at 660 Earhart Road is a 56 single-family dwelling unit development site. It was cited during a pre-submittal meeting that a second fire access road would be required due to the number of dwelling units in the proposed development. Under section D 107.1 of the 2015 International Fire Code. Later, during my first fire review of the submitted site plans, it was found that the second fire access road did not meet the minimum requirements of section D 107.2 of the 2015 International Fire Code for remoteness or distance apart. This is due to the fact that the site does not have enough public road frontage to be fire code compliant for a second access road. The petitioner was granted the only listed exception in fire code to remove the need for a second fire access road under 2015 International Fire Code section D 107.1, exception number 1. To this day, the petitioner has not accepted the listed exception in fire code. And I want to make a note that modifications or deviation from fire code is solely up to the discretion of the fire marshal or fire AHJ. Fire code is written as a minimum life safety requirement, and any exception from it, I believe, should be written in it as a listed exception for the specific code that is being cited. This ensures the safety is still being met with the intent of the code as written by the code writer. The proposed site plan does not meet the current fire codes that have been adopted as life safety standards by the city of Ann Arbor, Michigan. The code has not been misinterpreted. The provisions of the code do fully apply, and the reduced distance between the two access roads is not equal to, nor will it provide the proper protection or safety proposed in fire code. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn, do you have any comment?
No comment for me.
Is there any other staff report that wants to weigh in? That would have you be an applicable staff person, or is that's the complete report? So the next piece will be to have the applicant present their variance request.
All right. Hello, this is Jason Rickard with Toll Brothers. I'm in Brighton, Michigan right now. I want to thank the board for hearing us out today. I appreciate everything Mr. Redmond just said, and I don't disagree with most of what he said. It was very clear and very helpful through the process. So I do appreciate that. What we do, and like I think you asked before, is the code being misinterpreted, and that's our basis for this appeal. And we feel that it's being misinterpreted because based on Mr. Redmond's comments that he does have the authority based on the code under practical difficulties. And I do believe our practical difficulty is we do not have enough road frontage to meet this requirement. The life and safety of this neighborhood is being met with the second entrance, and the distance between those two roads in our mind is arbitrary with our constraint for our practical difficulty of not being able to supply the entire distance. So what we're asking for is not to remove the second entrance, which we have provided. It is to allow us to reduce that remoteness distance from 710 feet to 205 feet as we've provided in our plans. And we do believe that the safety and the life and safety of this project is still being met, provided those two entrances, even though they don't meet the remoteness distance apart.
Okay, thank you. So does the board have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah. So there's an alternate site plan that's offered. First of all, I do have one quick procedural question. So the code references a board of appeals within the fire code. Is that a different board of appeals than us, or was that intended to be us? Because the way the qualifications read, it sounds like it's supposed to be staffed more by fire personnel than building department or building qualified people. And just a question.
If I might jump in, Glenn Dempsey, building official. Our city code actually directs us to the building board of appeals and not to a fire board of appeals.
Okay.
And I don't believe I've been to one of these before, because generally in past we haven't had somebody want to appeal it. So, but the city in the city code takes us to the BBA. Or the fire department.
Right. So I guess here are my questions. There's a second fire access road that's proposed under Exhibit A, which would skirt the backs of properties like 1 through 8. Does that conform to the 20-foot minimum width exclusive of shoulders that's required?
Yes, that's the cross section that we have provided based on those requirements. Yes.
Okay, so that that would be a paved road.
That is correct.
Okay. And then I understand that that's not the preferred solution that you guys are advocating for, that you'd actually were looking to have like a divided boulevard instead.
That is correct. So one of the things that we did before we finalized our submittal to the city was to have a neighborhood meeting. And at that neighborhood meeting, Earhart Village to the north did, bring up some concerns with that fire access road being put there. We listened to their concerns. We actually went back and modified our landscaping plans pretty in depth, went back and had a separate meeting with their association board. They were actually pretty pleased with what we came up with. But one of their requests was that when we come to this appeal, that they asked for a variance from the 205 feet down to a boulevard entrance. So we would have two 20-foot access roads parallel, albeit they'd only be 15 feet apart. I think we went to the fire marshal in the very beginning, and he was not in support of that the first time. That's why we went with this plan. But we did promise that board that we would present that to you today as an alternative. I know that procedure has been approved in the past. I don't think it was under the new fire code, but it was, in previous approvals. So we do realize that would be, a long shot with this appeal.
I mean, it seems a somewhat contorted way to get in. There seems to be a lot.
Yep.
Okay. So I'd like to just ask this question because in Exhibit B, you have two places where the parcels are, the parcel bundles are separated. There's one in the upper part of the plan where the first turn is. I guess that's close to the Green Hill School property.
Correct.
And then there's another wedge-shaped split that's down near the very end that sort of faces down toward the Concordia property.
Correct.
Okay. So I live in the northeast part of town, and we have a number of relatively recent, that's within the last 15 to 20 years, subdivisions that have easily as many or more plots. And they have one entrance off a main road, but they have a fire access easement that adjoins another property. And I'm sort of putting the question out there to both you and the fire marshal as to whether that's a possibility that would, satisfy the intent of the code to have two remote entrances. And I guess
I'll jump in real quick there. So obviously, I've been doing this quite a while, and there are certain circumstances where if we were coming in here raw, that we would be able to provide a stub road to the northerly property line, for an example, that would provide that secondary access. And that subdivision may be a future subdivision.
Right.
And then the fire marshal would have the authority to grant us that approval based on the likelihood of that subdivision being approved and developed in the future. As you can see, the subdivision to the north did not provide a stub to our property through the site plan process.
Mm-hmm.
The property to the southwest did not provide a stub to our property during its site plan process. And obviously we have US 23 bordering us and in two private schools. So we've kind of been landlocked in there. So I kind of understand what you're trying to say. I would have to defer to the fire marshal on that because I don't see what our options are for that.
Well, since the property that you're developing belonged to Concordia and it adjoins the Concordia campus, why wouldn't that be an option?
Basically, for site constraints, that southerly boundary line is basically a 20-foot ravine with a creek that runs through the bottom of it. So it becomes very impractical to build a fire access road through there.
And anything having to do with the Green Hill School was not a possibility either?
We have approached them, and they basically don't want to restrict their rights because they don't know what their plans would be in the future to lock in an easement that would eliminate any future expansion for them.
Okay.
For just for the sake of those that you'd mentioned about this being through the kind of the building board of appeals and not fire personnel, the code that's being cited here is very similar. If I can paint a picture in your mind, is with egress from a building with the doors. It's the exact same concept that when you take the diagonal of a building and cut it in half for the location of your second egress door to be considered egress as a second doorway for capacity. So fire code follows a lot of the building code requirements. The code that's cited here obviously is to the extent for big fire apparatus to respond there to have access. And if you read the commentary under 2015 IFC for this, under the commentary books, it lists numerous items that could block the access of the fire department in the event of coming in. It can be anything from down power lines, accidents, even routine maintenance on the roadways. And that's why they picked the distance they picked. So the distance, obviously, to cut down from the 700 down to 200 is not compliant with fire code. Would it affect it? I mean, that's just the active nature of what would happen within that space. The listed exception that was granted that was in fire code that removes the need for it was to sprinkle the houses. And when I look at fire code, I do look at it as a minimum life safety standard, minimum requirement, kind of the same as the building code for egress coming out a hallway, a stairway, you know, the railings in there. It's all usually based off a minimum requirement. And I do not see how a 200-foot distance apart remoteness comes even close to what should be 700 feet. And when we have a listed exception that can be granted, that was offered, so.
And I just like to rebut that just a little, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, but we do have the right, and thank you for pointing that out, to fire suppress our units. And the reason why we're here today is that's an atypical process in this market. It's not commonly used to sprinkle individual single family homes. It becomes a burden to the homeowner. So we were just trying to come up with a different solution for that. And I do understand that there's a code for that distance. And I do understand that a building, and they're applying that system to this, and that's obviously they have to come up with some kind of system. But 200 feet or 700 feet down a road, I don't feel impacts the likelihood of any change of your access to our site. There are no intermediate intersections in that section of road. You know, if to me, if the code should be written as there has to be another means of access through that 700 feet of road, which there is not. Even if we went up 700 feet, there are no other subdivision roads that you could get through to get there. So it's all about the likelihood that something happens. If something happens in that first 200 feet that you can't get to us, it wouldn't matter if our entry, you know, if it's 700 feet up. That's the only difference of the likelihood of an accident happening in that 200-foot gap versus 700-foot gap, which is, in my mind, a little arbitrary, but it is part of the code, and that's why we're asking for that practical difficulty, because we can't physically get it with our property dimensions.
And in all due respect for what you just explained would be the exact reason why I would want you guys to go with an exception to sprinkle the houses, because most secondary access roads come off another road. That's how a lot of the sites are. There's a lot of corner development sites. The North Sky development, they have 2 access roads off the same road. The third access road is in the Barton Green development. And that was set up during the site planning of it. So they have 3 access roads, and one is through another area that if them 2 are too close, they wouldn't have the problem.
If that subdivision to the south never happened.
It's happening. It's almost done right now.
I understand it, but if it never happened, which is a possibility, that those 2 entrances would still be the same situation we have.
There is actually a code for that particular thing for the second development, and that second development was cited, as far as I know, in that I wasn't the fire marshal at the time, but it was cited within their secondary access, because when that second site, or when the site plan came up for Barton Greens, it was clearly marked within that site plan for that to be the third, to confirm that they were keeping that third entrance into the North Sky development.
Yep.
And the only other one, just for reference purposes, when you guys mentioned the Packard development, that was dare I say, a play on numbers, that they had 29 buildings in there, and 25 were 1 and 2 family dwellings, and 4 of them were multifamily, and they came underneath the numbers on both codes that apply to it. So,
right.
So I'd like to interject real quick too. I think it's important, if we're talking about North Sky, all 3 of those entrances, whether they're in the North Sky development or the development to the south of North Sky, are all still off of Pontiac Trail, and they're all still very close together.
I would disagree with you. I'd have to look at the Barton Green one. I believe there's a entrance off of that somewhere else. I'd have to look at the site plan again. But the greater the distance, the better. Like I say, we can talk about this, about the spacing of it. But when you're on the same road, it makes more sense that we are farther apart when we're on the same road. It's always better. One of the site plans I just did, I'm working on today, has 2 access points, and they are purposely on 2 separate roads. So for me to be on the same road would be more reason why I would want to stick to fire code to keep what the fire code writer wrote as a minimum requirement.
And I agree. I don't disagree with what you're saying. And I think we've given the largest gap we can between our entrances based on our site conditions.
Okay.
That's why we're asking for the appeal.
Mhm.
Officer Redmond, when we mentioned sprinkling the houses, would it require sprinkling all houses? Or is there any variance to where you only sprinkle the furthest away?
No, the code is written for all of them to be sprinkled, and there's the 3 different systems that can be installed, whether it's an NFPA 13, 13R, or a 13D. Obviously, the most reasonable one is a 13D. It has the less stringent requirements for a 13D system, but it lists all 3 systems that can be installed. But it does include the verbiage for that code says all dwellings would be sprinkled.
That was a good question. We asked him the same question and got the same answer. So thank you.
What's the cost of sprinkling? $1 a square foot? Would it cost less to sprinkle than put an access road in? I mean, roads aren't cheap.
The sprinkler system's extremely expensive. And that's why it's a burden to our homeowners.
It does allow you to have more.
I guess I would like to interject that, the state of Michigan waived or took the residential sprinkler portion of the code out of our residential code when they approved it. Other states are using the International Residential Code. And one of the concerns that I have, first of all, you're being given an alternative, and yes, it may add cost to the houses. But if we have a code requirement that specifies the access to the site and you're being given an alternative to meet the code, then I think the sprinklers should be done. And one of my concerns is that the Michigan Association of Home Builders went to the state and had good reason for removing residential sprinklers from the code. But in cases where I think there's a demonstrable safety issue, I think that the sprinklers are the option. We're not usually, we've done residential projects where we've put sprinklers in them. Yes, they do add cost to the project, but they also add a safety aspect. And not that cost isn't an issue, but we usually don't look at cost as a life safety reason for reducing the code requirements for a project. So just out of curiosity, what is residential sprinklering adding to houses in other states where you're working?
Every market's a little bit different. And so this market where it's not prevalent the cost is much higher because it was hard for us to even get companies to bid us out on this. So I believe our cost would be much higher here in Michigan because they just don't do this system. Where in Chicago, where we do it, and I think half the houses we build in that market, there's multiple trades that do it on a daily basis. The price comes down. So it's just a burden in this market because of the lack of trades.
Want me to get you some names?
I would love that.
Is there any other questions by the board? If not, can we have a motion? I can say before we make a motion is that if, depending how the variance comes out, you can appeal our board's decision to the state, and you have 30 days to do that. So you'd have to do that by the 20th of June to appeal to the state. Is that correct, Glenn?
You're muted, Glenn.
I'll have to check on that, but I'll have an answer for you tomorrow. If a fire appeal goes to the Construction Code Commission or not. So
we'll respect the decision made here today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone on the board have a motion?
I move that in the case of BBA 21-002, SP 21-006, the appeal of the fire marshal's decision that the development at 660 Earhart Road is denied, and the Building Board of Appeals affirms the fire marshal's decision for the reasons below. The true intent of the 2015 International Fire Code in section D107.2 governing the development at 660 Earhart Road have been correctly interpreted by the fire marshal. 2, that the provisions of 2015 International Fire Code D107.2 does apply to development at 660 Earhart Road. And 3, the applicant has not proposed an equal or better method of protection or safety.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Any other further discussion on the wording of the appeal? If not, those in favor, say aye.
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 Is that 3? You want to raise your hand so Deborah can count them. Is that 3? 1, 2. Those opposed? The aye. So that is 3-1. We have.
That's my count too.
Okay. We have 5 members or 4 today.
We have 5. Can we do a voice vote?
I think there was 4 yeses or 4 no's. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
So 4 no's means that appeal doesn't pass. Is that interpreting that correctly? Or 4 votes in favor and it does pass.
It was I read from the appeal denied.
Okay, so it's written in the, not written in the positive. Okay.
It's written in the negative.
Right.
Yep.
All right. If it's written in the negative, then I'm voting in favor of not approving the variance. So I guess that would be 5-0 then is the outcome of that then.
Well, thank you very much. We'll revise our plans to fire sprinkle our homes.
You could reduce the number of lots, maybe to 30 lots, I guess, too. Bigger lots, or what else? The other ways to get around it there.
There are, but
site plan approval, but yeah.
that will be the best solution. So thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, everybody.
Next item on the agenda is
Old business.
old business, yeah. So BBA 821-001, withdrawal of appeal number 830 at Henry Street. I'll provide an update on that.
Glenn, did you want to share about the withdrawal of that application?
I don't have it up in front of me. Do you have it?
I don't have it in front of me, but I can speak to the reason that they're no longer requesting the appeal. At 830 Henry, Unit 11, they've decided to alter the stairway to meet the minimum code requirements and are no longer seeking a variance from the code.
All right, good news. Found a way to make it work. That's good news.
Yeah, they did.
Next item on the agenda is new business. There's nothing listed there for new business. Anyone have any new business items? Reports and communication, nothing listed. Public commentary general, do you have any comment, any public, Deborah?
No one in the waiting room.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Good day.
Thank you.